Hello viewers and welcome back to the Dukascopy TV studio. I'm Ben Jones, and joining us once again to discuss Americans working abroad is Jackie Bugnion from American Citizens Abroad. Jackie, thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you, Ben, very much for having me.
Not a problem. Now, if we can begin by talking about the foreign earned income exclusion. It's something that the US government grants to American citizens working overseas to almost lessen the impact of citizen-based taxation. Now, your organisation has always been a supporter of this, but recently you've shown concern that it may be under threat of elimination. Why do you think this is?
Well, the foreign earned income exclusion is unfortunately always under threat, but we felt that the threat was increasing recently. The reason is that the US government, as you know, has an enormous deficit. And the foreign earned income exclusion looks like low-hanging fruit. It's a one item in the tax code that could be cut, and it could be slid into other legislation with no warning. We've had past experiences of legislation being slid in at the last minute, which affect Americans overseas. And the foreign earned income exclusion is essential because of citizenship-based taxation. And the reason that we're very concerned now is that with a lot of the discussions about tax reform, different committees have come out and said, have appeared to be objective in their analysis of foreign earned income exclusion. But they're always picking up the figures of what is called a tax expenditure, which is produced by these are figures produced by the Joint Committee of Taxation. And when the Joint Committee of Taxation makes these estimates of the revenue that would come in if foreign earned income exclusion were eliminated, they do not account at all for the change in behavior of people. And so the other committees, the Congressional Budget Committee, the Committee for a Responsible Budget, have come out and they've reviewed the foreign earned income exclusion, and they use terms such as tax break, which makes it sound like that Americans overseas are really having a break. This is not the case. In fact, what would happen if the foreign earned income exclusion were eliminated is that the people who are working in the Middle East and Asia, which are low-tax countries, would be totally priced out of the market. And this is our major concern. The reason that we've defended the foreign earned income exclusion recently is because of all of a sudden these different studies coming out. And we learned from the Senate Finance Committee that there are some senators that would like to see the foreign earned income exclusion eliminated. So we've produced a paper which is called the Section 911 Mirage, because it is a mirage. The Joint Committee of Taxation says that, for instance, in recent years, that revenue would be $5.8 billion in addition. But the fact is that Americans overseas also have the right to use foreign tax credits. And by using foreign tax credits, they would simply replace the foreign earned income exclusion with foreign tax credits. And there would be practically no extra revenue coming in from 80 to 90% of the people overseas living in high-tax countries. But as I said before, the people who are living in low-tax countries would be severely penalized because they would be priced out of the market.
Now, you mentioned the paper that the ACA have recently put forward, outlining their feeling for the need to keep the FEIE. Yes. What points does this paper raise?
Well, in this paper, we have pointed out the demographics of Americans overseas, the fact that 80 to 90% of the people live in high-tax countries, and that if you eliminate the foreign earned income exclusion, those people will apply foreign tax credits, and there will be practically not one extra penny of tax revenue for the United States. However, the people doing the tax filing will not be happy, because filing the foreign earned income exclusion form is much easier than using foreign tax credits, which requires a professional taxpayer. And the people, what we have pointed out also, and what people in Congress have forgotten, is that in the Tax Reform Act of 1976, they basically eliminated the foreign earned income exclusion. And at that time, tens of thousands of Americans, mostly in the Middle East, working in the engineering projects in the oil fields, were forced to go home. Some even had tax bills higher than their revenue. It was absurd. And this is what Congress forgets, because it was so bad, they had hearings immediately. Retroactively, they canceled the law, but in the interim, people had come home. Businesses had stopped what had been profitable businesses. The United States lost major export markets at the time, and they not only lost export markets, that was the same year that the United States trade balance turned negative. It had been positive for nearly 100 years before. So the consequences, the risks, and what we've pointed out in our paper is that even if they think they might get some additional revenue from those people working in the low tax countries, basically a lot of those people would have to leave. And if they're in the oil industry, they might go to Venezuela or they might go to Canada. High tax countries, there will be not an extra penny of revenue coming in. Some may return to the United States and join the unemployed. And basically you're losing contacts, because a lot of the companies who are dealing with Americans want to talk to an American. So that the long-term effects on the trade balance of the United States would be quite negative. This is really what we're trying to point out, that it's not a favor for Americans overseas. What we need is to have in place a system of taxation which allows Americans to be competitive. And this is why ACA is recommending and has prepared its position paper on residence-based taxation. We've submitted this to the Ways and Means Committee, to the Senate Finance Committee, and we're going to continue recommending this and trying to get a change. Because residence-based taxation would allow really Americans to be fully competitive overseas. The foreign earned income exclusion is, if you wish, it's a partial fix to the fact that you have citizenship-based taxation.
Okay, and finally, are there any other new developments regarding taxes that will affect Americans abroad?
Yes, unfortunately there is. Because of the Affordable Care Act, there is a new tax, which is called the NIIT. It's the Net Investment Income Tax, which is a tax on passive income, interest and dividends, capital gains, people whose income of that category is above a certain threshold. But if somebody sells a house, they would be affected by this. This additional 3.8% tax, we have discovered after the law was written, is written under Chapter 2, it's a new chapter of the tax code. And the law says that foreign tax credits are allowed only against taxes under Chapter 1. Now, either it's a drafting error that they overlooked, or it's a deliberate statement of Congress to double tax Americans overseas, because that's what it does. If Americans cannot use foreign tax credits overseas on such a tax, they're paying taxes first where they reside, and then they're paying 3.8% in addition to the United States. We've written to the Treasury Department about this, and we're contacting the offices again in the Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee on this tax, because this is totally unacceptable. That's sheer discrimination against Americans overseas. Along with that same issue, same Affordable Care Act, there is an increase of 0.9% on Social Security contributions for Social Security and Medicare for self-employed individuals. And unfortunately, the United States requires self-employed Americans overseas to contribute to Social Security in the United States and Medicare, even though they're already obviously contributing to the system in the country where they reside. And this 0.9% additional tax represents about a 6% hike in those Social Security taxes, so it's not insignificant. This is just one more step of making Americans overseas less competitive. It's a major problem.
So, Jackie, how can people help American citizens abroad?
Well, there are several ways people can help American citizens abroad. first become a member of American Citizens Abroad. The website is very easy to remember. It's www.americansabroad.org. We're always open to donations, of course. We're expanding our activities, and we have so many projects that we're very interested in having active volunteers if one is interested in joining. And people also can help Americans abroad simply by writing their congressmen and their senators to support our efforts, to support our projects, to be aware of what our projects are and our recommendation for residence-based taxation. Congressmen are very sensitive to receiving mail, and next year or the year after, I really do believe tax reform will be on the plate. And ACA has managed to have our projects. We're visible now. We're on the table. It's going to be a long, striving battle to get everything accepted. But for that reason, we need support in many ways. And I should say, to encourage people to support us, that American Citizens Abroad is by far the principal organization representing Americans in Washington, D.C. We have set up our organization now in Washington. We've recently set up also a global foundation, which will be working on research projects. We have our executive director in Washington, D.C., and we're building up steam very quickly, and that's why we really need the support to make things accelerate.
Okay, Jackie, thank you very much for coming in again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Not a problem. And thank you very much, viewers, for watching. That is all we've got time for, but make sure you stay tuned to Dukascopy TV for more updates and exclusive interviews. But for now, goodbye.